So today we're starting with day 3 of this week. We're starting with the class components. So class components, we actually learned classes in JavaScript a while back when we were going through classes. So if you go back to intro to JavaScript, you'll see that we took classes here: prototype, inheritance, and classes. We learned how to build. We learned how to use classes to build a kind of like a blueprint, and then that blueprint you could create a child from that class. So to create a child from that class, you use things like extends. So this will be this is like a dog, and then extends animal component. So you create a class for this dog. So that would be, that's what we did last time in JavaScript. So now we're in React. So we need to use the same thing and build classes. Okay. So that's what we will do today. So to get started, so let's read this. Today we will learn about classes in React. We will use classes to build out our components. Classes components have been a big part of React ecosystem because they bought a lot of functionality that we normally didn't get in React API when we're using function components. And now with hooks, that functionality is available in functions components. However, a lot of projects will still have class components in them, and we need to be prepared to work with classes when we see them. So now we learned a lot about function components, but you will see a lot of companies and a lot of places you will see class components, and they're very similar to functional component. The only difference is the way they're set up. The main reason why React had classes was to make it so that classes are basically well known in other languages. Like if you go to Java and other languages, they have classes, but JavaScript, it doesn't have like a native classes. It has a syntactic sugar. The classes are basically like a cover for function. So classes are actually function in JavaScript, but they just say class. Underneath it is a function, and it's a prototype that you guys learned how to build the prototype and all that stuff. So after a while, the React team, they realized that classes have a lot of things that are powerful, but they also confuse people, and also they confuse even like the machines. So let's see, if you go to React hooks, the introduction to React hooks. So this is when they introduced hooks, which are part of the the functional components of JavaScript, which you learned a lot. But if we go down, you see there's no breaking changes, meaning moving from a class component to a functional component, there will be no breaking changes. The motivation, basically why they changed to functional component. Here they say hooks solve a wide variety of seemingly unconnected problems in React that we are encountered over 5 years of writing and maintaining tens of thousands of components. Whether you learn React, use it daily, or even prefer a different library with a similar component to model, you might recognize some of these problems. So, they kind of list all the problems that that they encountered when they were using classes. So if they say here, it's hard to reuse stateful logic between components. So that would be when you're using class. Complex components become too hard to understand. They say classes confuse both people and machines. And one of the reasons, one of the ways that they confuse is classes use the this keyword. You guys learned the this keyword we learned in JavaScript. And this keyword can refer to different things. The first thing it refers to is the global document. So this keyword is pretty confusing. These are some of the reasons why React kind of the React team kind of moved away from classes. But still, if you go to any company, you will see that they're using class components somehow. So that's what we're learning today. So at the end of this lecture, you'll be able to explain class components and use class components to render some state data to the DOM. You'll be able to share data between components using state and props. You'll be able to respond to events triggered by user interactions and handle user inputs via forms in React. So all this you guys learned in like a functional component, but today we're going to go over it in a class component. Okay, so here is an example of class component. Like this is a class component right here, and from here, what you can see. So who can tell me, like, just you can write even if you want. What do you see here? Like you see a lot of things that are familiar to you. What do you understand from this? And this is one part. This is one part, and here is the starting. So what do you understand from here? And like, just write down the things that you're familiar with, like you have seen before, or if you have heard before. And also you could talk on the mic if you want. So you guys mostly are familiar with extends, right? You have seen extends before.
Yeah.
You use extends to do what? What do we do to extends?
To make a reference to the parent class.
Parent class, yes. So this one is basically saying app is a child class of React.component. Okay, and here you have a constructor function, right? You're probably familiar with this. Who can tell me what this does? Super.
It will copy what you already put, and then you add more stuff into it.
Yep. So it copies all the properties that the parent has, and then you could add extra if you want, or you could use the ones that you already have. Okay, so that's good. And here, coming from the functional component, you guys are familiar with the return, but not the render. The render is a function that React component gives us. So it's a method. Remember when we were doing the class components, functions are methods inside class components, inside classes. So this is a method, and then this function just basically returns this. So this is similar to our previous way of doing things. Let's see. Let's go to Rebel for just a quick example. So this is how we used to do normal. No, don't try that. Okay. I wasn't trying. Okay, so this is how we used to do. We used to say class, and then we give it a name. Let's give it app. And keep in mind that when you're doing React, when you're doing React, React.component is part of React. So you cannot get this from outside. So, but now we're just creating a basic class. And here you just say constructor. This is a constructor function. You pass all your stuff here. So here is properties. Okay. And what was I trying to, yeah. So now here, remember we used to do something like eat, and then we say, okay, now return something, right? And then we use the expression and type here. Now render is part of React, so it's coming from React. And now all it's doing is it's a function or a method that renders JSX basically. So that's the only difference between, these are the main difference between functional component and also class component. And we'll go deep. We'll go in detail. And here's where you host your state. So first you say constructor, and you say super, and then after that you host your state. And all the state of class component go under this dot state, and then you put all your states here. So Remember how we used to do in functional component, you have to declare your own state, give it a variable, and then put it in there, and then create two methods. This one, you put everything in here. So that's a difference. So let's go ahead and let me show you today what we're going to be working on. We're going to be working on this application. It's a shopping list. It doesn't have functionality right now. There's no functionalities. There's no, we need to basically add items here. We need to click item and then it crosses the item, meaning that you did the shopping for that item. So that's what we need to do. And we need to be toggling like click and then it crosses, otherwise it doesn't cross. And also make this form controlled by React so that we can add something to it. Okay, so this is our application. We have a app.js, and app.js is importing like 3 things here, or 4 things. It's importing React and then 2 components that we will go into, and then just basic CSS. And then at the top of this, there is a data, groceries. So this data is hard-coded. So right there. So we can put this in like another file and we could call it like data and we could import it. So it is the same thing. And then we have here a class component. So class component, it starts with class, the name of the component, and then you say extend, and then you say react that component. Then after that, you say render. Don't forget this function parentheses, otherwise it will not work. And put the curly bracket, and then the return goes in here, right? So the return is the same as the functional component. And then you export just like functional component. So this is our setup for today, the first part. And then in here in JSX, we have shopping list, H1, and then we have a form, which is this one, this form. And then we are rendering grocery list, which is a component in here, grocery list. And then we're passing a prop, and we call that prop groceries, which is this list, right? So that's all we're doing right now. And if we go to groceries list, you will see that it's a simple component, and this is actually functional component. We could change it to a class component if we want. And it's all it's doing is it's looping over the groceries, and then it's passing it to item, which is another component, which is this. And then item is just basically like a card. It renders just each grocery item. It renders here. And there's a few things here, and we'll explain what that stands for. So this item renders our grocery list, each one of them. And then we have the form, list of form. The form contains a couple of things. It's a class component, and it has a handle change that we will write down, and handle submit we'll write down, and then basic form that is not controlled. So this form is basic HTML form with a button. So that's our setup, and we have to kind of work on it so that it has a functionality to add, and then you have to cross, and then yeah, and then when you click again, it doesn't cross, it makes it normal, and you could add as many as you want. All right. Okay, so let's do that. Let's get started with the app.js. Any questions so far? If you're confused about the project to set up and all that, let me know. I can go over it again and explain a little bit more. All right, let us get started. Okay, so here, what we're going to do is, first thing we need to do is we need to do the constructor. So bring in constructor. So what we're going to do is we're going to say constructor. So every time you create a class component, sometimes you might not need a constructor, but most of the time, 99% of the time, you will need a constructor. And then here we will say super to grab all the properties that React.component has. and then we can add our own properties here, which is our state. So we'll say here that this dot state equal to, and for now we're just going to make it an empty curly bracket. Okay, so now this is our state, and this is equal to what we used to do, which was const, and then we do something like groceries, and then set groceries, right? Whatever the spelling, and then use state, and then here we put groceries, which is at the top right here. So this is the groceries. So that's what we need to do here. And the way we set up that is by just putting groceries in here. So we could do two things. We could name it like that, groceries, and then say groceries again. So now the name of our state is this dot state dot groceries. You could also just say, if you have one state, you could just say groceries, and that will mean what we just did. So we're going to go back to that way so that it's clearly, this is a name. So this is basically an object. So this is the key and this is the value, and the value is coming from here. So this is all, this is the value. Okay, let's get rid of this. So that's our state. So our state is set up now. If we want to, let's say, console log our state, we can do that by going inside render. You cannot console log in here. You can console log inside render. You could say console log this dot state dot groceries, right? And if we save that, go back here and open here. Let's see. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that's not working out, but right here, array, and we have a list of our items. All right, so that's our state. So now we need to pass our state, which is this, to groceries. So now groceries is only grabbing this information from directly from the data, but we don't want that because we want to manipulate it. We want to change our state. We're going to say here, instead of saying just groceries, we're going to say this dot state dot groceries, right? So this is coming from the state, and it's a prop. So we're sending this prop to there, and it's going to be same, right? So that's that. Let's see. So a lot of things happen here in the class component. Basically, what we're looking for is that React gives us a lot of properties, without us looking for a hook or anything. Basically, it gives us all the properties that we need. And we will learn more about that next lecture. But for now, just keep in mind that set state is this. So this is basically set state. So in the background, basically this is it has set state. So that's our state. The next thing we need to do is we need to work on the toggling. So now there's nothing happening. So we need to work on toggle. So whenever we click, it crosses. Whenever we click again, it does what it did. So to do that, we need to create a function, right? To do that job. So to create a function, you can create in two different ways. So here you can create a toggle function. Okay. You can create in two different ways. One way is by just creating a sort of like a variable, but this is normally a function. So this is a method. So we could say something like toggle. We could say toggle item, and then just do that, and then open it like that. If we do this, and then here, what we're going to do is we're going to use something called set state. This is called this dot set state to change.
Wait, I thought you did use that right in there after super. You say this ready state, and
Yep.
The
This one is
there-
this that's a state. This one is this set state.
okay, so where is the two values, groceries and groceries
This is just
within,
this is just a name. We could just do this if we want. So we're using this as just a name. This is a
but it's
key.
not actually state.
Yeah, we could name whatever we want here. So we could call this here like a list, right? And then we have, when we pass in here, we have to say a list, right?
So what is it, like a objective or a state? Because
It's right here.
Canada.
This is what we're putting this state. It's right here. It's an array of all these items, and we call them groceries. And they're all these items. We put them right here in this state. So
And then
the value
and
is
that's the key, and the value bears.
yeah. So this is the key,
Okay.
and the value is all these items. So the name, we just use the name of this, and you could just say
Yeah, I got it.
groceries data. We'll grab this and change this to groceries data, right?
Okay.
So that's that. And then, so okay, so when it comes to class component, there is a method called this.setState. Remember how every time we create a in functional component, we say something like we have to create const and then something and then set something, right? This set something, we have to create it for each state. So if we have multiple states, then we have to create multiple set something, and it has a different names. But when it comes to class component, you have only one, which is this dot set state, and that's it. And that's how you change the state, and this is the state, right? And that's how you change it. So in here, we need to use the toggle. We need to basically update the state and change this process kind of like a status from like false to true or true to false, right? So to do that, we're just gonna, for now, we're just gonna say here this dot set state and make sure that's how it's written. We're just gonna say here, we're just gonna say, for now, we're just gonna keep it empty like that. So, and we have to add here a kind of like a functionality that changes the state. And we will do that in a bit. So yeah, so what I was trying to get to is, if we do this, if we do it this way, and we have a method, and just we could pass anything here. We'll probably pass something like an ID, but we pass something here. Then we have to use something called binding, right? Remember that we learned binding when we were learning, like what was it? We were learning the different the four methods of the four ways you can use this keyword or something like that. So to bind, we have to go to the state. We have to go to the state and then bind it that way. So we have to say here, we have to go inside the constructor and say something like this dot, and then grab the function and say toggle item, and then say equal to this dot toggle item dot bind, and then this. So we have to write this for each function that we create in here. And that's really confusing. So to avoid this, so let's kind of like comment that out. To avoid that, we have to make this function an arrow function. If we make it arrow function, it's gonna be fine for us, and we don't have to use that bind. So if we do that, now we don't need to use this binding. So now this became a function instead of like, it became like a, instead of just a method, now it can take, it can use this keyword. So it will basically send this keyword to the state instead of just within this method. So that's kind of like the small change when it comes to class components. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So now we need to just finish this function, which toggles our items so that we can save time. So what we need to do now is we need to loop through the groceries. So in here, we're just going to loop through the groceries using map. So and also this is an object. So we're going to say groceries, and then we're going to say this dot state dot groceries, and then dot map. Now in this map, we're going to compare two things. We're going to compare the ID we're getting and the ID that we have. So here we're going to say something like item, and this is a arrow function, callback function. You already know. Here we're going to say if, let's say, if item.id is the whatever these items that we have. So each one of them has an ID. If that ID is equal to ID, which is what are we getting? So we're going to be passed an ID, and we're going to get this ID from we're going to get it from one of the we're going to get it from item. So every time we click, the change goes to the item. And it would be better if I kind of draw out, but I will do that in a minute. So here we say if statement. So we're going to compare those two. If that's the case, then we're going to say toggle purchase. So we're going to change it to purchase to true, or we're going to change it to false. So here we're going to say return. We're going to say return, and then we're gonna use a spread operator and say item, and then we're going to say the only change we're going to do here is the purchased. Purchased will be changed to the opposite of whatever it is. So if it's false, it becomes true. If it's true, it becomes false. So that's how you do that. So you put exclamation mark in the front, then that means every time it's true, then make it the opposite. Every time it's false, make it the opposite. So this is if the two IDs match, this is what happens. If not, then we're going to say else. We're going to say return item. So just return the state basically to us. I think I missed something. Okay. So this else is not part of this, so it's right here. So we're going to say comma there. So okay. So this seems confusing, but what we're basically doing is we're trying to toggle this. Let me kind of draw out basically what we have. Let's use something like Google. What was the drawing thing for Google? Drawing tool. There was a drawing tool. Is it this one? Okay. That's fine. Let's see. Education. There was a tool that I was using the other day. That was really good. Okay. Hopefully we can find it in a minute. So we save time. Okay. 7 tools. How do we go there? Create a timeline. Okay, this is not what I was looking for. Give me a second. Yeah, that's fine. Let's grab something like Chrome extension, Chrome drawing. Drawing page. I think it's this one. All right. Okay, so hopefully that works. So if we use it, how do we use it? Okay, so I should have, okay, yeah, so this allows us to draw. Okay, so imagine, so our app, basically, this is how it is. So this is the app. This is way too big. Okay, yeah, so this is the app component. The app component has another component that's connected, which is the form. So this is our form. And then there's another component that's connected, which is grocery list. I'm gonna say G list. Okay. And then the grocery list has an item, but the item can be each item. We're rendering each item with that. So it's going to be multiple items because each time we have an item, it renders. So these are small, each item that we're rendering. So, and then our state lives here. This is our state lives here in app.js. This is the state for all the items. And then we have to pass it down to groceries and then pass it down to each item. And then we have also, right now, we created right here, we just created a toggle function. So that toggle function lives here in app.js. So this would be toggle function. Okay. So the toggle function, we need to pass it down to groceries and then pass it down to each item, right? So I'm sorry about the colors, it's a little weird. So the toggle function, we have to do that. So the toggle function, basically what it's going to do is it's going to look at each item, and we're going to give these items, each one of them, we're going to give them on click, right? We're going to give them on click, and that on click, it's going to trigger the toggle function. And every time it triggers, then the status of this item changes from false to true or true to false. And every time it changes to, let's say, false, it means it's not done yet. So the item is not, we didn't shop it yet. And every time it's true is we're going to put a cross, we're going to put a line across it. And that's kind of like our setup right now. And everything that goes to items goes through grocery list, because remember, props, they go one direction. They don't go sideways, and they don't go to they don't go up. So that's how props work. So all props go here. So this would be, we'll have a couple of props here. We already have one prop, which is the state. So this is one prop right here that we're passing from app to grocery list and then to each item. So hopefully that makes sense and kind of like helps to understand. And also you can look at list item and you can see that it is, it's expecting one thing. It's expecting a function so that we can add each, item. So right here, we need to pass another function. We're going to say something like add item, and we have to create it in app.js. So, and that function, we have to pass it to the form as a prop. So that's kind of like our setup. So let's go back to app.js. So this method, not method, but yeah, it's a method. So the toggle method, let's see if everything is correct. It looks good. Looks good here. This looks good. Yeah, everything looks good. So this basically, it gets an ID, and that ID would be ID from here. So this would be, every time we do the click, it basically sends an ID to here grocery list, and then it sends it to app.js, and then app.js gives it to this function. So that's how it will get the ID. And then it will basically, every time the IDs match, when they match, it will change the status of the purchase. Okay, so let's make that happen and pass this method to groceries list. So this would be another, what do you call a prop? Let's paste it again. Item equal to, and every time you pass in a function in class component, you have to say this, and then say toggle item, like that. So save that. Let's go to groceries list. And here, groceries list, we have a couple of things that we pass into item. So we pass into key, and we pass in also the items. And now we have to pass the toggle. So here we have to say toggle item, and we're gonna pass the same way. So here we have to say props dot toggle item, and that's how we're gonna pass it. Okay. Does that make sense to you guys? Just passing things through from app.js to groceries list and then to item, because that's how the components work together. And ask me any questions you have anytime. I'll try to answer. Okay. All right. So let's. What is that?
Can you go back to app.js?
Yeah. This whole function is
doing, there are two IDs in there.
Yeah, this whole function is doing toggling. So it's basically what it's doing is comparison. It's comparing two things. It's comparing the element that we click. Like let's say if we click milk, then it's gonna say, okay, milk. I get the ID from milk. Now I want to go through all the items. So this is what it does. The map. It goes through all the items, all these items in this state. And then what it does is finding me the ID that matches with the ID I got. And then when it finds the ID, then it says, okay, the only thing we need to change is the status. And the status, if the status is changed to false, then the milk is going to be like this. If it's changed to true, it's going to have a line across it. And that means we're done with this shopping list item. Okay. If this statement is not true and there's nothing that we don't need to do, then here is what we're gonna get. We're just gonna get the state back. So our basic our original state. So yeah, and we can console log things later. Let me just make it work, and then you guys can see. So we pass that as a prop to groceries list, and then groceries list passed as a prop to item, and then item is right here. So item is a component, and it's a functional component, as you can see. It basically does, it shows the item, basically, like the milk. And then we can add on click here, and then the on click basically says, okay, if it's kind of like done or not done. So let's add that on click, and then you guys can see how it works. So right here, we're just gonna say, gonna add on click here, on click, and this on click would be, we'll have a couple of things. So as usual, we're gonna say here props dot, we're gonna grab the function that we were passed to. So that would be toggle item. And then the toggle item, we're gonna pass an ID. And remember this ID right now. So I'm gonna say props dot item dot ID. This ID is coming from groceries list, because groceries list is looping through all the items and it's passing each item to item component. And then all we're doing is just we're saying we're just saying item.id. We're just grabbing the ID of each item. And now every time we click, this ID is going to go to all the way to app.js, and then just we're going to compare we're going to use that function, the toggle function, to compare. So now we have that, and here we have a class name, and this class name is basically saying it's using, as you can see, ternary operator. It's basically saying if the item is purchased, if the item is purchased, then add a class called purchased. If it's not, I mean, if it's false, then don't add it. So that's what's basically saying. So if item dot, let's go to app.js right here. So if this is false, then it's not going to add this class, which is purchased. If it's true, it's going to add this class. So if it's false, this is what it's going to render. If it's false, if it's true, this is what it's going to render. And if we save now and go back here, we can click any of them. And as you can see, it changes, right? And if we click again, it goes back to normal. Click, click. And that is because of this right here. So this is helping us so that if it's true, then it makes it false. If it's false, then it makes it true. That's what it's doing here. Any question about that? So this is basically adding a class and then removing a class. So when it's true, it adds the class purchase. When it's false, it removes it. Right? Any question? And we talked about the ternary operator. Ternary operator takes the first statement, and then if the first statement is true, then this is what it does. If the first statement is not true, then it does the second thing. That's what it does. Any question? Okay. So if there's no any question, then we can go to, let's see. So the second thing is just add item to the list. But before we do that, we need to understand the form, right? So the form here, basically it needs a state, right? And then it also needs a this handle function. And we learned this handle function and how it works. And also, and keep in mind that every time you have a class component, you don't need a const here. You don't need that because this is an actual method. It's a function, so it's not a variable. It's not an anonymous function that we have to set. We have to set const to. So we handle function, and we need a handle submit. Every time we submit it, we need to call a function, as I described here, this function add item. We need to call that and then kind of send that to here. And that's how we're gonna add the items. I hope this was like a black background or something. Yeah. Okay. So let's do that. So, and also here we have a form that's basic. There's nothing to it. So we need to add a couple of things to it, like a value and also on change. So every time it changes, and also we need to add a on submit here. So let's actually mark here. Let's add on submit. And also we need to add here. We need to add the on change. Okay, so let's set up the state first. So let's set that up. So basic state, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna say constructor. We're gonna pass props here because we need one of the functions here from the original, from the app.js, and also pass a super. And every time you pass a super, if you have a props, you have to pass the props to super too, because props are part of the things that we're trying to grab. So super props, and then here we're going to pass the state, this that says state. Okay, and the state, we just need one thing, and this one thing would be the state of our form. So here we're going to call it something like item text. We're going to keep it empty, right? So this will be our state, and that will be just this input. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to make the handle change work. So that when we type here something, now it's working, but if we add here let's add here something here. So here, what are we going to do is we're going to change the state. So every time, update every time we type a letter. So when we type a letter, we need to make sure that we're keeping track of that. So this will be same as what we learned in functional components. So this says state, and here we're going to say every time we change the item text, and we change the value. So, and also we're saying here E, you could call this event if you want. Event.target.value. So every time the value of this thing changes, that's when we're going to change, when we're going to call this function. And that's pretty much it for the handle chain. So right now, and we could also say here, event dot target dot name. It's the same thing, right? That's the same thing. And also you have to put that here like that. But we're just gonna say text item text, because we don't have a lot of inputs. We only have one input. Okay, and here let's put the value, and the value will be, as usual, will be the state. So this will be this dot state dot item text, and the onChange would be the function we just created. And keep in mind that every time we bring a function, you have to say this dot and then handle change. So that'll be our method here. So just like that, we are managing the function. And if we console log it right here, handle change, let's console log this dot state dot item text, and we open this, clear it, and then every time we add something to it, as you can see, it's changing here. Okay. Any question about the handle change and how it works? We learned a little bit last time when we were talking about the forms, especially the first lesson about the forms. So you should be familiar with the handle change. So that's a handle change, and we added here. The next thing we need to do is we need to add the handle submit. And the handle submit. Okay, so who can give me the first thing we need to add on handle submit? Every time we submit the form, what do we need to do? Let's say we submit. What do we need to do?
Prevent
default. Yep, prevent default. So we're gonna say E. You could call this whatever. So E dot prevent default. Default. The function. So now we could just say here console log. We'll say something like E dot, or let's say this dot state dot text. Okay, so every time we submit that, we should have, so console log here, clear, add something here, and then submit. Still refreshing. Let's see if we did it correctly. Prevent default. Okay. I think I spelled it correctly. Okay. Oh, the thing is we didn't even add this function in our form. So I have to add it in here. We have to say on submit. So every time we do submit, this is the function that you're going to be using. This dot handle submit. So always keep in mind this keyword, and that's what's confusing about class components. You have to keep saying this everywhere. So clear this, and then submit something. Boom, it's right there. Okay, so that's good. So we have to take that and then send it to app.js so that we can add it to the list of items, basically the state. We can add it to the state. So to do that, we need another function, and we're going to call this one add item. So we're going to say add item. So add item, and then the add item would have to receive the item that it's trying to add. So it is basically a function that adds everything it receives to the state. So we have to kind of get something. And here we're just going to say item name. And the item name is just what we saw here when we were doing like this, the item name. So that'll be the item name. So here we're just going to say, first thing we need to do is we need to kind of tell this function what it received. So we need to store that in a variable. Let's say something like new item. So this will be the new item. And then we're going to say, okay, the name of the new item is what we received, which is item name, right? The ID would be, we could create a new ID, which is a new date. New date is just the current time in a timestamp, meaning like it's just a numbers of the day to day and the seconds and the minutes and all that in just one long number. So we could use it as an ID because it doesn't repeat. Okay, oh, not that, just a comma, and here comma, and then we need to add the purchased. Purchased is the status, and we're gonna say false. So every time we add a new item, we just want to be the purchased status to be false. So we just want it to be like this and not checked out. All right, so that's that. And this is basically saying we didn't use it. We declared, but we didn't use it. Now we just need to set that to this state. So we're just going to say this dot set state. And then we're just going to grab the state, which is groceries. And then we're going to say, okay, we have to use a spread operator to copy the state. And we went through this last time. This dot state dot groceries. We're basically copying the state, and then we're adding something new, which is the new item that we created, which is this. So whatever new, just add to it right here. And that should do it. So this function is working perfectly now, but we have to pass it. Remember, we have to pass from app.js add item, we have to pass it all the way to the form. Okay, so where is the form? List of forms right here. So we just need to pass here add item. This, don't forget that this add item. Okay, so we pass that function. And now if we go back to list item, we have props here. So now if we kind of like console log our props, we can't console log our props because it's a function that we pass. You cannot you could console log a function, but it's just going to show the function itself. So we just, instead of saying here console log, we need to pass the data to that function. So we need to do, we need to call that function first. Okay. So we need to call that function and say this dot props dot add item, not handle change, add item. And then we need to pass the state, which is that state dot item text. Okay, so save, we're just going to say save. Now go back to the form. And now if we refresh it, we should have it working. So let's add something like Angelo. Voila, just like that. It's working now. We could add meat, because I know we love meat right there. But the form is not clearing. So every time we add something, it's not clearing. So all we need to do here is we just need to add one more thing here. We could just say this dot set state, and then make the state empty. So we're going to say item text equal to empty. And if we refresh it, every time we add something, let's add meat, it goes empty. Okay, so any question about what we just did? This function, passing it to the form. Any question? Because we're almost done, but if you guys have anything you wanted me to clarify, let me add a couple of comments so you guys have something to look back. So here, the handle change, the handle submit, we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna keep it like that. Let's see any other comments we need to add. Okay, fine there, we're fine. One thing to keep in mind is that you could destructure your props here. So remember that we were doing destruction, you have to do it inside the render. So if we want to pass something like, let's say we only pass this add item, you could say here const add item, and here you could say equal to this dot props, right, like that, and then you can use this inside here, or if it's something else, so you could do that too. Let's see app.js. See if I missed anything. Let me write down a couple of steps here so you guys know what's happening here. The toggle. So here we have to say arrow function. Keep in mind that arrow functions implicitly bind methods to the class. So we don't have to do binding like this binding. Also, what we're gonna do is here we're looping. So these are the things we're doing. Loop through. I don't know, my edge is not working. Okay, all of a sudden my edge is kind of messed up. Loop through the array. Wow. Okay. The array. You know, I'm just gonna copy all this instead of typing it. Just wrote down already. All right. So my edge is pretty much messed up, and my Y is messed up. Okay, I have to fix those. Okay, so I can use it that way. So now we loop through the array to this array, this state groceries, and each iteration, every time we go through it like this is each iteration. If we're looking for, if we're looking at the item we clicked on, so the item we clicked on, so each time we click on item, clicked on, toggle the purchase field, and then we're going to toggle it to either true or false, else leave it untouched. So this is leave it untouched. Okay, so that is kind of like the thought process for that. Any question? And here what we're doing is we're initializing the state. So initializing the state object. So that's what we're doing here. Any question?
Ma'am,
What are the other examples that this is used for, like not grocery list? There's some other examples. Like in
So
the real world?
the assignment you're doing is to-do list. So the assignment is to-do list. You're going to be using similar things, just like this, the toggle and all that. Do you mean like the class in real world?
Yeah. Mainly is it works with like list stuff or something else?
No, it works with anything. It works with anything that you do with React. Anything that you could do with the functional component, you could do with class component. So it's just another option that you could use. And class components were the first, that was the first way that React was working. So let's go here, React class component. Let's go something like history. So class component, the class component, it's grabbing me the history. Okay. Okay, let's say something like, yeah, let's just say class component like that. So class component were the first thing that React used to build something, and then eventually it moved to function. So it was so classes were created in ES6. So ES6, you guys remember, is 2000, I think 15, when JavaScript was kind of updated. So we add the render and we move the body of the functions into the render, replace props with this dot props. So these are the kind of things that are different when it comes to class component. But you could build anything that you could build it with functional component with class component, right? So it's used for a lot of things. Okay, and keep in mind that every time you you're using class component, you have to say React.component, just like that, with a capital R, capital C. You cannot create your own class component and then extend like another component. That will not work inside React, right? So that will not work. What other things? Okay, let's see if I'm missing something about class components. Let's go to our let's go here. So we explain class components, use class components to render some state to the DOM, share data between components using verbs. Okay, respond to event triggered by user interaction and handle users. Okay, we did all that. So we're just looking through if I missed something. Okay, another thing is, let's say you have multiple states. Remember how every time we create a if we want to create a state, you just go ahead and like create your own state, like multiple states. You say const whatever, and then you create one, and then another one for something else, another one for something else. So in class components, if you want to create another state, all you have to do is just add it here. So you just say comma, and then add something like another state, and then you could either leave it empty or you could grab some type of data from somewhere. So you could just do that, but you have to give them a name. So these are names for your different states. So these are like when you say const, where did I write down that? When you say const and then you give it a name, so this is the name. But each one of them you could change with this dot. You could change it with this dot state. So this dot state is where is it? This dot set state is kind of like the general way to change your state, right? Any question? Okay. Think of any questions, and then we're gonna go over. Let me see the. Let's go over the assignment. So we kind of detailed a lot of things here if you want. Okay. So you're going to be working on this app. It's a to-do app. You're going to be using class component. This is how it's going to look like. It shows an image here, a GIF. You could style it, make it look really nice if you want. So here it says your job is to write a component to complete the to-do list application. Your to-do list should be functional. You should design it however you like. Feel free to get creative here. Okay. You have to do, so this is your data to start with. So this is kind of like the starting point. Just like our groceries, we had like a list of groceries. Let's go back here. The task field is to do title that you'll be shown to the user. The completed field should be by default false. So just like we did today, and then you could use date.now to create an ID. So these IDs are already created. If you want to create new IDs, you could use that. Okay, what else? So don't start with the styling, just to start with functionality first. Make sure your app is working, and then add some function, add some design to it and some styling. What else? Yeah, it's pretty easy, especially if you're just if you follow today's lesson and you understand what we talked about. It's it comes really easy. Okay, so I'll let you guys work on that. And there's a stretch. If you finish it, there's some stretch here that you could try. Any question? And don't fork this yet. I think I worked on it before, but I changed my computer, so I have to kind of like download it again and then work on it and see if there's any issues or errors, and then submit again. So I'll send you a message in a little bit to let you know when you can fork it and start working on it. Okay, any question before we close out? All right, I'll let you guys go. Have a great, yeah, go ahead. Someone wanted to say something?
So you said, so you said don't fork it?
Not yet, yeah. Just let me check it and then give me maybe an hour, and then I'll send you a message through Slack. Let you fork it. All right, guys. Take care. Have a great iftar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.